that should scare you, and that should scare a lot of people because 80% of the volume of the brain is developed by 3. 80%. It is the most. It is the time that we're most susceptible to outside influences, right?
And his parents taught him how to read. Long story short, because he was able to read a science book, he was able to build a windmill that greatly helped his village, and they were able to harvest all year long. And it just made me think like learning and being able to read it unlocks knowledge, and knowledge is gold because
We have to teach our kids how to create healthy boundaries for yourself. Because then when you grow as an adult and maybe you have all these traumas, because you never learn how to create healthy boundaries. Now, healthy boundaries doesn't mean
When you dig deep in research, you have to be ready for what you avoid.
To me, at least, reading is like an inspirational tool to find the if lost. Love it.
I like that.
welcome to the Ethicsville podcast. We have Dr. Jacquelyn Bobien-Blanton. She's an expert reader. She's also the author of It Takes a Village to Raise a Reader. And it's such an honor not to only have her, but we also have Kevin and Autumn that are our co-hosts as well. So, Dr. Blanton, or Bobien-Blanton.
Blanton's.
Blanton is fine. Okay, Dr. Blanton. Question for you. How did you start this journey of becoming a doctor? What inspired you to take this career?
Well, I've always been drawn to education. I've been in education for over 35 years. And I didn't want to go into teaching. I wanted to be a part of the um, special education team. I wanted to work with students who didn't have a voice, who needed extra care. But then I did my student teaching and just fell in love with it, right? Just being able to impact the lives of others, making a difference in the lives of someone else other than yourself, it's just powerful. And I was drawn to it. There's ups and downs, but the good outweigh the bad, right? And then getting my advanced degree, I noticed I went in with a topic already, and so I knew what I wanted to do, and so I wanted to get the advanced degree so that I can be a little bit more helpful to my community, understanding the need and having that background. I wanted them to feel secure and feel um, uh, that they can trust me with the information. So I wanted to make sure that I had all of the information that I needed to be able to help them. So that was why I went to get another degree.
I love that you wanted to give back to the community, and that was a one of your major inspirations is to give more. What did you see in your community that you thought that really needed the presence of Dr. Jacqueline Blanton?
Right. So I knew that we had a problem. So I'm also in charge of our preschool program. And so the studies say that if children went through a very quality preschool program, then the chances of them being ready for kindergarten rises exponentially, right? And then by third grade, they should be proficient readers. That wasn't happening. And so I knew that we had a solid preschool program. I knew that others in the area around our district had a solid preschool program. But then when you look at the state assessments for ELA, English Language Arts, our students still couldn't read. So I needed to find out why. When I found out that it wasn't just my district, that it was happening throughout the country, that's when I solidified and crystallized my study for my doctoral program.
when do you think the shift of reading habits changed?
That's a good question. And to be honest with you, um, I don't think that it was so much of a change. We've always had a reading problem. There's always been a reading problem, right? COVID did not unveil this great big reading problem.
Right.
COVID unveiled the access and accessibility, right? That woke us up. Well, we've always had a problem in this country with reading, going back to anti literacy laws, where it was against the law to teach someone of color, African Americans, to read and to write. And so we found a way. We've always found a way. We knew the liberating power that reading has, and we taught our own, no matter what the cost, because death, the penalty for teaching someone to read or write was death. Because people knew, of course, if you learn how to read, then they might be exposed. So we've always had a problem. We've had a problem for years and years and years. What shifted, I think, was the mindset of individuals, understanding that reading is a social construct, right? That reading doesn't just happen in school, it begins at home. And I think when we started to release that to schools and we took families out of it or put them on a back burner, I think that's when it started to shift. And then not understanding the developmental continuum of reading. That is part of the problem. That's the biggest part of the problem. Not understanding how reading is developed, when it's developed, and who's responsible for developing it. We took it out of the hands of our families and we placed it in the schools, and the schools can't do it alone.
Even with structure with reading too, like reading provides that structure, how to organize speaking, or even how to organize objectives, leaderships. That definitely takes a part within reading. Um, I- so one of my questions with the shifts was for the shift into it. I think like I come with in a generation. I was born in a generation where the technology was starting to rise. So 2000 era. Um, and when it started to rise, I think I got a lot of my education from YouTube, from videos. So every time I'll go like how to do something, instead of picking up a book, I'll search for a video and I'll pick up the video and I'll do like how to draw something. And I'll draw it. I always struggled with reading sometimes. One of my things about reading was how to. Sometimes people really enjoy it. And I enjoy certain books. Fiction books, not as much. I like to do like practicalities or like the theoretical books I like too, because then it makes me wonder. But how can somebody, if they're starting their reading journey, how could they pick up a book and build a habit slowly to develop themselves into a proficient reader?
That's a good question. So I just want to preface what I'm about to say with the fact that um, our brains were not wired to read. We have to teach it to read, right? It does this great thing, right? It rewires itself, right, to form pathways for reading to develop. A lot of people don't understand that. It's very different than language. Language, you can put a child in a room full of people who are speaking and they will speak. You don't have to teach them how to talk, right? That is not going to happen for reading. You cannot sit someone in a room full of people who are reading, whether they're reading out loud or silently. It's not going to happen. You have to teach it to read, right? That starts very early. What we think is reading starts in kindergarten, and then we build these habits in kindergarten. And if we think that, we're 5 years already behind, right? Reading starts really at the moment of conception. How? Well, all of the stuff that mom eats, all of the environmental pressures and stress impacts the developing brain. Reading is all about the brain. The brain is the main character, right? And so if we understand that, then we have a point of reference. And so how do we build stamina, right? Because in order to learn to read and read well, you have to build stamina. We can't build stamina if you don't like what you read, if you can't connect with what you read, if you don't have an emotional a connection to what you read. So what do? We start very early. We start to develop these reading habits. We read, we tell stories, we make it fun. We put children in the books. We do the characters. We make it fun for them so that they will catch on, they will like it, right? And then as they get older, we have to be in tune to what they like. It's not so much reading on your, or you have to have a book that's on grade level. But that's all great too, because we have to build vocabulary. But in order to build reading stamina, you've got to make sure you're reading what you like. And so we've got to pinpoint what students like. And then we've got to make sure that they are reading what they like. We will always give them the grade level stuff and the wars and all the other stuff we're going to do that. But in order for them to get there, they gotta read what they like. They also have to see themselves in what they read. They have to. My book, the logo. I created no, I didn't, but the person that created the logo for me. It's beautiful. Looks like a pen, and it has some pages. But on either side of the logo, there's the word window and there's the word uh, mirror. And so I specifically had to put those two words because books should be mirrors and they should be windows. Windows so they can look out and see a different world, different perspectives, that there's just a lot out there that I need to connect with, right? And then mirrors because they need to see themselves. They need to build their confidence. They need to know who they are, where they belong in this world. So they should see people who look like them. And so when you pick up a book, whether it's at home or whether it's in school, you have to be emotionally tied to it. You have to be interested in it. Then you can build upon that. Then you can bring in some stuff that you might not have known. And that's how we build knowledge. That's how we build capacity. You take what you already know, what you're already interested in, and you build from that. And that's how you build interest. That's how you build stamina.
Mm.
I love what you're saying because reading is requires a lot of discipline, structure of discipline, and to be to create that resilience. Even in life, we're gonna have to read books that are informational that might not seem so stimulating to us,
Mhm.
but it's just like you said, building that resilience. I'll pass it to Autumn.
I know there are a lot of stigmas around boys reading, right? A lot of boys are like, I don't want to read. Who's going to read a book? And it kind of like favors that reading is more feminine.
Mhm.
But I'm curious, like in your studies, if you found that, is it more like toward the gender that a specific gender is struggling to read, or it's across the board?
It's across the board.
Mhm.
But yeah, trying to get males to read is a challenge. And and let me say this also, that the problems that we're seeing in the United States regarding reading is not geared toward uh, black and brown, right? Everyone is experiencing difficulties reading. The difference is those that have the resources to get their children interventions and some other forms of and some other resources to help mitigate the problem, they're going to go ahead and get those resources. Part of the problem is that if we're sitting here and we have our children experiencing difficulties and we go and we get tutoring and we get other resources, we're thinking that it's just our children. Okay, we get some remediation and it's okay. Not understanding that it's not just the four of us, but it's 40 times 40.
Mm.
And so we don't really know that there's a problem because everybody's getting their own help. So it's happening across the board. But as far as boys are concerned, we pigeonhole them. We make them read what we want them to read. Boys and girls are different. Their brains are a little different. They develop differently. And so, whereas boys like to move their bodies, right? They like different things. They like to read different things than girls. Why not give it to them? They're still reading. The goal is to read, not read what you want me to read. We can get into that too, but we got to get them to read first. And so we have to build their capacity, their stamina. So if they need to walk around a little bit, let them walk
Mhm.
around. If they need to stand up and read, let them stand up and read. Movement is not a dirty word. It's just how they're accessing the information in the book. If we take that away from them, then we deny them their access toward the content that's in that book. So they need to move. They're people say there's not, such thing as, learning preferences, but there are. And our boys, they like, to move their bodies. So I remember our youngest son, I'm like, wow, he's not sitting down reading. Like, I need him to be able to read. He's an African American male. He needs to read and write. And so he would play with his toys in the corner, and I would just read out loud. And one day I skipped a couple of pages, and he said, "No, that's not what happened. What happened?" So now I know he's listening, but he's just off in his corner. He's not sitting with me, which is okay. It's okay. He was off doing his thing, but I was still able to read to him. I was still able to get it in. And he was listening. He was just listening differently. And if we respect that, then our boys will be okay.
I like how you build that relationship too, because I do think there's an importance about building the relationship to form the reader. And I was curious about, like, it's true. We definitely have to find outside mentorship to help our children develop into avid readers. Um, our programs that are designed to create readers in school have their responsibility as much as the parent. Where do you think those opportunities exist on both sides so they can better cooperate?
Mhm. Wow. Yes. So, like, I'm really passionate about that because one of the things that I think we're missing as far as the developmental continuum of reading is we think that reading occurs just in school when you get to kindergarten. And people don't understand that reading is not just about letter names and sounds and putting those things together. Oh, wow, you can read. But it's about building background knowledge, right? It's about getting experiences and opportunities to build language. So where does the village come in? That's the part that the village plays. Taking children to the zoo, to the museum, to the park, out for a walk, talking about the trees and the cars and the houses and to being descriptive in what you're saying and how you're saying it. Um, just exposing them to so much, even to people. I talk about the church and I talk about during Easter Sunday, or when people get ready to do those recitations, and that's building oral language. What happened to those days? Seeing people around you that really care. Now they might be strict on you, but you know that they care. And so when you're watching Mr. So and so in the church, and he's modeling those attributes and characteristics that you find, that you want to emulate when you get older, that's building a foundation. That's encouragement. That's where the village comes in. So now Mr. Blanton we're going fishing. We're going to take you fishing. We're going to talk everything about fishing.
Right.
I've never been fishing, but now this is an opportunity to build language and give me more vocabulary words that I've never been exposed to. And so the village, we need programming. We need churches to open up, except, just not on Sunday. We need them to open up 7 days a week. We need them to form relationships with the school districts so that they understand what children need and maybe host literacy nights for families to say, what can you do to build my child's phonological awareness? What can I do to build their phonics skills? What can I do to build reading comprehension? Right? What can I do? And then have programs where students get together at all levels, and talk about a book that they've read. Talk about, it doesn't have to be a book, it can be current events. We want to get the language and the oral language development. We want to get them to speak and to talk and nurture that in a safe space where they can grow. So that can happen outside of school. We can't take them to, all these trips that I'm talking. We can't. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the money. We don't have the funds to do that. But the community can. Do we have programming for students under third grade and under, third grade to sixth grade and sixth grade and beyond? Do we have programming at our libraries? Do we have programs in our community that will foster reading development? Are are we in a position to say in the state of New Jersey that literacy is important and is a priority? So if we say that that's a priority, then I should see things that will help children develop these skills. And do we see that enough? No. And also pediatricians. Why do I say pediatricians in the medical field? Because children under 3, right? That is their primary um, um, that is their point of reference for families. They take to heart everything the pediatrician says. So if the pediatrician says, listen, if you want your child to be a reader when they get older, these are some of the things that you need to do right now to build their brain capacity. That speaks volume. That's a game changer because my pediatrician is telling me I can do these free things that will build my child's brain for reading development. And pediatricians can't do this by themselves because they're very busy. But how about partnering with the library and hosting events for new parents? These are some of the things that we can do as a community to make sure that literacy is prioritized.
I love what you said because there needs to be a campaign for that, a healthy campaign, like especially we see the difference when we campaign about a change and the investment is there and then within a few months, years, you start seeing that development happening. And one of the things that also I'm taking into account are two things from what you were saying is like we forget that, for example, in ancient times, literacy was only for those privileged. Like the most of the world didn't learn how to read. So it was like if you were in a high position, a prince, and it always brings me back to the story of Joseph because Joseph was literate. That's what got him into really good situations, right? And it's a beautiful story for those that don't know, and the importance of like of understanding how to create healthy boundaries for single parents to create an avid reader at home. I don't know if you have a question for
Yeah.
Dr. Blank.
I love the pediatricians and all those networking connections to create. So basically, a more functioning society of readers. Because like when you have those readers, you have thinkers and you have people that would just perform at a different level or even think at a different level, just because now their mind is literally expanded. from reading, like it's expansion of the mind. One of the things I also like is like I'm just gonna pitch it out there too, like pamphlets at pediatricians that they'll just say like improve it, like you want your kids to have great brain health, give them a
Right.
book. And I'll be like that's like a simple pamphlet that someone's like usually reads, they're like, oh no, I don't want my kid to have this disease, but it's like I want them to have this great health. So that's a great one. I guess one of my questions that I have is for different categories of reading and finding out the perfect category for a kid and having someone see it. So for example, you have I'm gonna give out like 5 kids just for an example. You have a kid that loves sports.
Mm-hmm.
You have one that loves video games.
Mm-hmm.
You have one that loves science.
Mm-hmm.
You have one that loves, or you know, we'll work with those 3: sports, video games, science.
Mm-hmm.
For those 3 different categories, what kind of books or subjects of books would you suggest for each one?
So sports, there's so our youngest son is a sports fanatic, right? So there's all kinds of autobiographies out there about the different pick whatever sport that they like. Let's just say it's basketball, and you know they all have favorite players or favorite teams. Why not get them a book about that, about those individuals? And even if they can't read it as yet, like read it on their own, read it with them. And if you can't read, get a trusted adult or a trusted youngster that can read, and let them read it to the child. It could be on anything. It could be on coaches. It could be on the game itself. It could be. It doesn't even have to be real. Right? Fiction and nonfiction books are great. Um, Also, there are movies. There are movies out there a lot about sports, right? So depending upon the age, okay, there's a movie about the Titans, right? Let's just throw that out there. Before they watch the movie, let's read the book. And then let's talk about the differences between what you read and what you saw. That stimulates a child instantly. Now there's purpose for reading,
Yeah,
right?
for the movie too.
And purpose for the movie.
Movie.
So now you get to see the movie. And then you'll be surprised. And I know a lot of students that I've met over the years and that I've taught over the years, they won't watch a movie about a topic until they read the book, if there's a book out there. Because they want to formulate their own images in their mind. And they'll say, well, that's not what I was thinking. That's not what I was envisioning, right? To see the movie. And that was so disappointing. But they will read the book first before they will watch the movie, and then have a healthy conversation. Bring other people in. Let's talk about it. It's have to be a right or wrong thing. We just want them to talk and to experience. And as far as the video games are concerned, in order for those video games to take place, somebody had to read about it. Somebody had to do some reading, right? So if that's what you want to do, we need to read about it. Let's read about some of the people who developed some of those games that you like. How did that happen? How can it happen for you if you want to do it? Let's do some research. There's reading and research. So now you're still getting the reading in, but you're reading for a specific purpose now. So sometimes you got to trick them into it. They don't know that you're building reading skills or helping them to build reading skills. The only thing they know is I'm researching this topic because it's interesting to me. I want to be a content person, or I want to be the person to build the next, what is in the game? Fortnite. And so now they're interested, not understanding that requires reading.
I love that. It definitely also opens the field of investigation at a young age for them, because you will need a lot of those skill sets as you progress in your education, and also the importance of dissecting information. And I believe perhaps that's one of the biggest challenges education has, is we're unfortunate, fortunate and unfortunate. Fortunate we have technology, but we need to understand that technology is there to be a tool for us and not to do the work for us. And when we confuse these two things, we forget that our brain itself is an amazing uh, software that keeps editing, keeps learning. And if you don't put information into it and you put more information to ChatGPT, what are you feeding your brain? Are you really training it to stimulate, to further acquire knowledge, to acquire wisdom? And those are the things that kind of like scares me sometimes, Dr. Blanton. But I'm gonna let Autumn with her
And
question.
that should scare you. And that should scare
Yes.
a lot of people
Yeah.
because 80% of the volume of the brain is developed by 3.
Mhm.
80%. It is the most, it is the time that we're most susceptible to outside influences, right? So it can develop positively or it can develop negatively. What happens in the brain, to your point, is it works with connections, right? So the dendrites and the neurons, they have to form connections. And so we form thousands and thousands of connections a day. When we don't read to our child, when we don't speak, when there's a lot of stressors around them, when we don't pay attention to them, those connections are not formed. And if they're not formed, when you get ready to go to kindergarten, that's when we're going to see it. There's gaps.
Mm.
So when you give your child technology and before 3, you're not allowing the connections to form. And then what happens is the brain undergoes a pruning process that use it or lose it.
Mhm.
And so if it's not used, you lose it.
Love it.
And then when you get to kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, we don't have enough of a foundation to build on. And so you slowly but surely see the foundation folding because the foundation has not been placed,
Mhm.
it's not been formed. And so people need to understand that yes, you can give your child device at 1 and 2, but you're not allowing the brain to do its thing.
The tangible experience is so important at that age too, because the exposure, Dr. Blanton is talking this beautifully, is the importance of exposure, living, touching. You know, little kids at that age, they're little scientists. That's why they drop something, they want to touch, they want to feel, they want to, when they fall, they acquire that experience like, okay, this hurts. Living, it's so important. It's how the brain starts to take information, start analyzing, right? Subconsciously, you take that information till the rest of your life. You know, and love how you put that beautifully together. Autumn, pretty sure you have a few questions there.
I do. So I think, unfortunately, the iPad has become a babysitter, right? And I think
I'm sorry, Autumn.
No, it's true.
That was a good one.
It has, and but I feel like there are boundary lines, right? Because I think there are certain families who look at the school as like the drop-off center where like they're gonna do all their education at school, and then when they come home, it's kind of like either rest, relaxation, or just like I had a long day at work, so let me like try to breathe and I'll give you the iPad. And then we have families who do value education, and then we look at the mental health of certain children because then there's like the pressure of education. So my question is, how do we find a healthy relationship with education where we are worried, or like we're more invested in our child's development, but we're not, because I feel like there's two extremes. How do we walk that line towards like a healthy balance?
Right. And so we do need a balance. Like technology is here. Technology is a good thing.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen. I say to families all the time when I see them with infants with the phone and with the iPad or whatever, and they're not even 3 yet. And I say, they're going to learn how to drive, just not at 5. They're going to learn technology, just not at 2, right? Let's let the brain develop so that the connections are made properly. And then when we decide to introduce technology to them, 3 and up, it still needs to be monitored. It still needs to be monitored. Why? So without getting technical, there is um, there is a process called serve and return. Right? So it's like a tennis match. A child will offer up the opportunity to engage with conversation with you, right? If you don't take it, if you don't, take it, they're not going to offer it again. And so it needs to be I serve up opportunity to speak with you, you've got to serve it back. And it goes back and forth. That does not happen with technology, right? So remember when I told you about what happens in the brain with the connections, they're not being made with the iPad. And so if they're not being made, then we're not building a foundation for reading to occur. And that's where we find ourselves. The foundation is flawed. And we don't know it because we don't know the developmental continuum of reading. We don't know the components of reading. We don't know that seeing a McDonald's sign and you say, oh, that's McDonald's. That's a connection. That's a connection. And how does that mean? How is that going to connect to reading? It all connects. It all connects. So we have to find a balance. I say that when you at 3 and 4 in the preschool, that we sit with our children with the technology. 30 minutes, not straight. I'm talking 30 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Right? And that's it. Bring back everybody gets mail delivery, right? We get boxes from all kinds of online retailers. Save those boxes. Let children play with them. Go back to the old days. Give them some tape. Give them some boxes. Give them old sheets. Give them pots. Let them be creative that way while you are cooking, while you are relaxing. Let them have those open ended materials to do what they want. That is still building the brain for reading to occur because now you're going to ask, I'm wondering what you're doing. I'm wondering what you're using. I'm wondering how that will stand up. I'm wondering why that keeps falling. You're still building reading those pre-reading skills. You are, and you're sitting and you're relaxed. You're cooking or you're doing whatever you need to do, but you're giving them the opportunity without the technology at this point to build critical, creative skills, imagination, all of those 21st century skills that we need. You're building as they are infants and toddlers all the way through.
Mm.
Our middle son, even he's a musician. He used to have a choir. It was great when the choir when he had the stuffed animals because we could see the choir and we wouldn't step on them. But it was very difficult when the choir was invisible. My husband would walk and then he would have a fit. Daddy stepped on my choir. Dude, he didn't see it. He didn't
Got in
see
there
the
like
choir.
Godzilla.
So developing that, and they will be so well rounded and rich if we just give them those hands-on experiences. It doesn't cost much. Just save the boxes, your old pots and pans. Let them go for what they know. They
Mm.
will be very creative. And then when you add and fold in the technology part, now they can use the technology to get more advanced in their building and their structures and whatever blocks. And it's amazing to watch them if they're given the opportunity to build those skills.
But creativity, it's such an important role in the development, not only as a child, but also in your adulthood, because it gives you purpose too, and it's true what you're saying, Dr. Blanton. Like, we need to read with a purpose, even if it's a purpose that we might dislike.
Mhm.
And it also, you see it like technology gives you immediate gratification. Reading is not going to give you right away. Sometimes it does because if, let's say, you're reading something you like,
Mhm.
it's going to stimulate you. It's going to produce that dopamine that you so much like. But
Mhm.
not all the time, because sometimes you have to study up
Mhm.
those large books of psychology. All right. And one of the things you were talking about, it's about the programs itself. And our system is built where a school is as good as the incomes that surrounds them.
Mhm.
And this is my personal belief. I do believe that that is the biggest opportunity. I'm from the Bronx originally, very poor neighborhood, and there wasn't really good programs. Let's say if I wanted to play a piano, there wasn't a program for a
Right.
piano. So how do you see that structure of income equals education? How could that help, like, for example, uh, those that live in a less privileged area? Because what I see is like if this was a race, correct, and I'm from the Bronx, but you're from Long Island, you have a head start all the way up here versus me paddling from the back. Do you view that as a issue?
It's a barrier. It's a barrier. And that's where we need to call on the community, the village. So if we know that the schools are they cannot produce the programming, right? What are our churches? There's in every town, there's 50 million churches, right? What are they doing to meet children where they are, to bring them the experiences that they need, right? Are we taking students, building scholarships and taking students away camping?
Mm.
Are we opening up our doors on a Friday night for middle school students to come and kick it in a safe space where they can learn a little bit about whatever the religions that they want to learn about, wherever they are, um, and then play basketball or do some crocheting or some knitting or some poetry or a book review or something like that. Why can't we open up the churches? Why can't we open up the schools on a weekend and have community people such as yourselves and come in and run a program? What are our libraries doing? What are we doing when the children are in school and now they're out? What are we doing on the summer breaks? What are we doing on the winter breaks? What are we doing on the spring breaks? What are we doing on the weekend? Are we offering programs that will help supplement our neighborhood? We might have to bring in other resources, whether human or otherwise,
Mm.
to say, okay, we notice that a lot of our students they want to learn music, but we don't have the instruments. Okay, the churches have instruments. Okay, why not offer it? Because music and reading go hand in hand. We know that.
Mm.
So why not offer it? In my book, I ask a question: is reading um, so I think it was about 2000, 2002. The goal for United States is to have 90% of its citizens reading proficiently at a 12th grade level.
Mhm.
Is that really the goal? That's all I'm asking. I don't need anybody to answer it. Is that the goal? And if that is the goal, how are we meeting the goal? What are the objectives? What are we doing to meet that goal? Is it really a goal? Do we want every citizen in this country, 90%, to be proficient readers? What does that mean to a system that we have a caste system that was built in the United States? What would that do to that caste system
Mm.
if everybody were readers?
It would change the culture because the higher the education, the more entrepreneurs you're going to have, and it will change. For example, let's be real, we live in corporatism today, where corporate dictates, being lobbying in the political system, and you see the effects on this. But what happens when you have highly educated, well-read people? Because a book to me is the conscience of somebody or the imagination of somebody. I was saying this the other day. It's like the Bible. The Bible is the conscience of God,
Mhm.
right? And you want to go to that source of information to acquire more knowledge because there's more than 4,000 years of writing in there, So what happens when you have people that read more? It creates a society that will definitely develop into more freedom as well. And what does freedom do? It liberates. It liberates oppression. It really embraces diversity because it understands that diversity is not a race or material thing, it's the criteria of each person. And I love what you're bringing. This is why it's so important to read. And there's a science behind it, and that's what we're trying to explore. Explore the science, the discipline of reading, and what do you benefit? How do you benefit later on in life when you're taking those SAT tests? Because you got to remember most of our tests are based on memorization, and that you remember all these words. But what's the point of knowing the word, but you don't know how to use them? Because you're not articulate. You haven't been exposed to real life to say, I can implement this word because I know how to use it. I'm just not gonna say it because it sounds beautiful, right? But it's like that's how you compose poetry. So I don't know, Kevin.
One of the things that you said that struck me is the science. Reading is a science. We know that it involves the brain. It's a science. And we know the pillars, we know the skills that are required to build a proficient reader, and we know the instructional method. When you don't provide either of the two, then you are infringing upon the civil rights of students. That's a social justice issue. We've known about the science for 40, 50, 60 years, and we sat on it. We provided a method of reading instruction that we knew did not work for majority of the students, and we did that for 40 something years. In fact, in New York, I think they just moved away from that type of instruction in 2019 or 2020. We knew that it wasn't working. We all knew that, but we didn't do anything. So my question is, how many children have we failed in those 40 years? How many students did we leave behind? How many students became disengaged with school and dropped out altogether? How many students went to college and changed their major because they weren't strong in reading? How many children have we failed knowing that instruction, that type of instruction did not work?
This is one of my hopes with technology in a sense, because technology opens up our information to information like instruction, the ways to read, like a playbook on how to develop the reading. Um, Technology, like you can research it and then you can pull it up and then you can start practicing it. So that's like one of the hopes with technology because the system did fail us, and it is designed in that way. The education system, they didn't you you hear about it from the industrial age till now. They made it for workers, for industrial workers. They designed it to be in a way where you're already acting like the 9 to 5 already as a kid in school. I forget, John, one of the Kennedys, they threw in a whole bunch of money into the education system to build workers, not really to build thinkers and entrepreneurs. Just gave somebody that was already like, it's programming since you're young to be a factory worker. And it's still like that now today. Like, for example, when you were talking about finding the kids' interest and bringing their education around that interest. I was listening to one podcast before where they were talking about the difference between like a homeschooling and like the public schooling. And one of the homeschooling things that they did was his kid was into masonry, and he loved like welding metal. He loved seeing all the metal stuff. So what he did, he has the resources and stuff, which we don't all have, but it's just interesting to hear. What he did was he took his kid to a mason and it started like showing him all the things about Mason. So they learned about the history about masonry. They learned about the practical applications. They learned about the math behind it, the science. They basically like took all the categories that you learn in school, but surrounded it around one subject, around masonry. And that's something that like I don't think schools do well in either too much because it's about the memory. It's about
Mhm.
learning about stuff that maybe you don't even want to learn about or not even going to apply in the future. So it's like you're more in the school system
Mhm.
just to practice and follow certain orders rather than and development is true, but it's development up to how far they
Mm.
really want you to develop. It's like they don't really want you to develop too far or else you're going to be insubordinate to their own uh, objectives like work in
Mhm.
the factory.
Mhm.
Because if you do have a whole society of entrepreneurs, you have a free society. And
Mhm.
does our system really want us to be free?
I like what you're saying because there's an
Mm.
intention of career preparation there,
Mhm.
correct? Like they're trying to promote somebody to be a professional that and based on what they love. And when you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. I can tell you that.
Right.
But there's a difference. What if let's say you create a system and it's just to look good on numbers, correct? And I'll give you a good example as a in industrial psychology, you
Yeah.
start reading these metrics.
Mhm.
Oh, we have diversity, but it's just on stats.
Mhm.
But how do you really embrace diversity? Is it should be a stat or should be people feeling free to be themselves? So there's a difference. What you're distinguishing here, I love what you're comparing because
Mhm.
this homeschool intention was to prepare somebody to be to find a career and second to be competent how through exposure through experience to the right programming but in a broad system it's generalized, it's not customized. So I think that's the biggest challenge. Like, can a school really customize everyone's career? It's, I would say, impossible. Because think about this: one teacher for 30 students. From there, the teacher alone is outnumbered. So, with technology, what could we do to bridge the gap and start really making customized systems?
Mhm.
It's like having a personal clinical psychologist. Imagine if that clinical psychologist is doing the same theory with 10 people and is generalizing, but you can't do that because everyone has their different traumas, their different background, their different
Mhm.
emotional stages. So you have to customize it so it can work and be patient to work with them for a period of time. Some will develop quick, some will develop long term, you know. But what you're saying is very interesting because ideally, I think that's where we want to get,
Mhm. Mhm.
where not only we teach people how to read proficiently, but where we can read what the career path should
Mhm.
be for someone.
And that's where
One
the
thing.
community comes in. And that's where the community comes in. So if you had someone that's in masonry, bring them into the school or have an opportunity for after school or a program that you can customize and you can have it for after school like you have in
Mm.
in high schools. I know we had cosmetology in our high school. You have some people have auto mechanics, some people have, culinary. Bring those things into the schools. And if you can't realistically, because of financial constraints, bring those programs into the school, then you make the connections with your outside industries. So you have someone that's in plumbing, you have someone that's in all these different electricians, and then you have some students and you go over a curriculum with them, and then now you're in the hands of real working, with people with a business. You could talk about the business, how you established your business, the art of plumbing, the art of, working with electronics. Now you're building not only skilled workers, but they still have a comfort of reading. You're still building reading skills, but it's specific to their interests. I think we have to do a better job with dismantling um, the cognitive redlining, the legacy of cognitive redlining that occurs in this country, because that's holding us back as well. Um, those are some of the things I used to think that we needed to um, move, just retweak or tweak our reading program, the infrastructure around reading. I think we just need to blow it up.
Yeah.
Blow it up. And technology is here to stay, and we need to embrace it. But if our students don't have the executive functioning skills to be able to access what they read or what they find out in a YouTube video, it's still not going to work. They need to be able to process it. They need to be able to go step by step. Then they need to apply it. Then they need to do it. All of those are executive functioning skills. Those are the skills that we've seen since COVID are underdeveloped. And that's the work that's the glue. That makes everything go, right? When the last time you saw a family sit down and play a board game, a card game? Those those skills are so important in building executive functioning skills. Playing peekaboo when a child is young. That's building executive function skills. Or a teacher in high school or middle school, you're talking about something that happened in history and you show an image and then you take that image away and you say to your students, tell me what you remember about the war or that image that I put. That's building executive function skills. It doesn't have to be separate and apart. It can be within your content area. You can build them both at the same time. But if we don't build them, that's why we're seeing behavior issues. That's why we're seeing a lot of the issues in school that we're seeing. We've not built their executive function skills.
Yeah.
Now, not everybody we weren't born with them, but everybody is capable of developing them.
Oh, well, I guess I have two questions. So, the grading system, school system, is like you go to a higher grade within your age, not really within the development of the grade. How would you determine if there was a new way to upgrade and to level up? I would consider like level ups in different areas rather than now you're on to grade two because you just turned this age. Like year after year, I'll consider it like a 10-year-old could learn something from an 8-year-old. An 8-year-old could learn something from a 10-year-old. And it creates like mentor systems too while they're young as well. And gives them different leadership skills as well because then it shows like leaders are not always going to be older. Leaders are not always going to be younger. It's diversified and it's getting diversified since the beginning. Like I think like a level system of like, oh, you just did like grading, but for level. Like you just did this for math. Oh, we know you're great in math. That you're doing really well in this. But in this level, it's like you're not doing too well. But you could teach like Sally how to do some math, and Anthony could teach you how to do some reading. And Anthony's not too well in math, so go ahead and teach some Anthony to really like trace some things together. I think that education system would probably work really well. Elon Musk, he talks about it too. I got the idea from Elon Musk because he really talks about education in that aspect. I guess one of my questions for is like, what are the principles of developing the mind for reading? So we talked about like taking the image away, describing it. We talked about like well, we gave a couple of different examples that just wasn't just sitting in front of a book and reading line by line. So there must be principles. And I'm high. I'm like I love talking about principles because those are like core universal truths. They're the core of what we do. So yeah. Principles.
So yeah, the science tells us that there are 5 pillars, or however way you want to call it. People say skills, pillars, whatever you want to call them. There's 5, right? It's phonological awareness that begins very, very, very young. And it's from 0. So phonological awareness. Then there's phonics. There's vocabulary, background knowledge, fluency, and then there's comprehension. You need all 5. You need all 5 to be a skilled reader, and it needs the type of instruction. It needs to be explicit and systematic. You have to build these skills, and you don't build, phonological awareness, and once you're done with that, you go to phonics. They're interrelated. So you need all five. And what happened just recently, some people are still using the same um, antiquated instructional methods to develop readers. They took phonics out, right? And essentially, they said that if you expose children to good literature, then they can guess a word that they don't know, or they can guess the shape of the word and use the shape of the word to figure out its meaning. It's a lot of guessing,
Mm.
all right? And it was not a good method. And so, bringing back phonics, we're saying that you need to sound out the word,
Mm.
right? Because if you go with the other way and you just memorize words, your brain is not capable of memorizing that much,
Mm.
right? And also, if you learn the sounds of words, then you can pretty much, once you learn the sounds, once you get the pattern, you can pretty much read anything once you sound it out. And so we need all five, and we need them to be taught explicitly and systematically in our schools. If we don't do that, then we're not going to change the reading problem that we have.
Right.
We're just not going to. We have to do all five. And it begins zero. It begins at the moment of conception, building phonological awareness skills, building phonics. It begins early. When we're talking with our children, when we're bathing them and we're talking to them, when we're holding them and we take them to the window and we say, yes, that's a truck. It's a red truck. It has four wheels. It has a horn. It has a ladder. That's building skills that they're going to need for those five areas of development.
Mm.
They need that.
I was concerned because to remove a theory that's practical, to use a hypothesis
Mhm.
to teach our children, that's
Mhm.
Experimentation.
well, I would say, well, when you have a hypothesis, it's just an idea that you still have to prove.
Mhm.
And then you remove something that has been proven to put an idea is very dangerous, especially for children that is developing, and they're at that age they're sponge. They're just taking everything in, and that
That's what
kind of amazed
happens.
me.
Yeah, well, that happens when you take your eye off the focus. You take your eye off the prize, the children. So education is a big money making business, right? There's money in failure. There's a lot of money in failure. And so you have these reading wars, this side against this side. And there's a lot of carnage that happens in war. But there's also people that's making money in war. And so those the whole language side, they made a lot of money. The programs were in almost 2/3 of our districts throughout the United States. A proven system that did not work,
Wow.
right? There were no stats to say that this worked. There were no statistics to say that this program worked. But what happened? Politics entered education. And when that happens, the we lose the sight of children. They become the back burners, and then the money makers take over.
Mm.
And so you take away the war, you take away profitability of those curriculum developers who are developing the programs and the curriculum that we know that it just doesn't work, right? And so that's what happened over the last 40, 50 years. We were sold a story. And I would recommend, it's a 6-part series. It's actually called Sold a Story. It's really good. We were sold a story. We had a developer come in and say, this is the best thing ever. It had glitter, it had glamour, it dressed nicely, it smelled good, it looked good, and everybody bought into it.
Mm.
It was the state of California that went from the top of the reading ladder to the bottom. And they attributed to only the reading program when they adopted that program. And after a few years, and this was in the 90s, they flipped back. New York, Klein knew that it didn't work. Knew that it didn't work. They still had some of the schools participating in it. The next mayor that came in, we knew it didn't work.
Mm.
The mayor continued using the same
Yeah.
program.
Wow.
Sense of insanity, right?
Wow.
I'll let you take your question, Autumn.
It's crazy. I think from my experience as like from being a student, I suffered a lot from test anxiety because I think like that's all that was really promoted after a while. Like learning kind of dropped and it just mattered if you passed the test. And recently I just watched a movie called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind. Amazing, amazing story. And like his parents taught him how to read. Long story short, because he was able to read a science book, he was able to build a windmill that greatly helped his village, and they were able to keep the harvest all year long. And it just made me think like learning and being able to read, it unlocks knowledge, and knowledge is gold because you never know like when you're going to need to call on that bit of knowledge in your life. So how do we kind of reinstill in our children like the thirst for knowledge and for learning versus just passing a statewide exam or getting a good grade on a test, because it's easy to retain and memorize stuff for a test but then lose it all, you know?
Yeah. That's a good question because that's what's happening in our schools. We're preparing for a test. We're not preparing them for the real world.
Right.
Just take that the child's interest and putting them in a situation where they will be able to research and get more interested in the topic and gain more information. And now you have this structure. Who wouldn't want that for a child? Who wouldn't want that type of experience for their students? The problem is a lot of times school districts, our hands are tied. So we only have 6 hours in a school day, right? 6 hours. And that 6 hours is divided with math and science and social studies and PE. It's not, it's we're trying to do so much with so little, which is why the title of my book, it takes a village to educate a child. And so we've got to use outside things that's happening outside, those experiences and opportunities that's outside of the school to build those types of interests so that they understand the power that reading has. And we've got to put the phones down and we've got to put the iPads down and they've got to see us read. They've got to see us inquire. I don't know about something. Let me research it. Right? Let me figure this out. And then we have to celebrate learning. We have to celebrate learning. When you learn something and you've been trying, you persevered. That's a high five. That's a knuckle bump. You've got to celebrate that. And we have to do the same thing that we do in sports. How many Knicks fans? They were celebrating. They were on top. They were celebrating. They were having a good time. But we don't do that as far as academics are concerned. So why would I want to learn something and I'm not going to get that reward, that feeling that athletes get? So I want to be an athlete. Not to say that athletes don't have the academic part, but the way we celebrate the status and the of the athletes, we don't do that for those that are in academia. So we've got to change our mindset. We've got to change how we interact with our students, whether our athletes or whether those that excel academically. We have to celebrate them the same way.
The sense of belonging.
Right.
Yeah, the sense of belonging. This is why your book, I wanted to go into your book now, because your book talks about the responsibility that we all play a game with creating good readers. When you first started to write this book, what was the first thing that came into your mind? What was that seed that was planted in your head?
When I learned that 70% of our students were reading below proficiency level, that bothered me. That sent I was angry. I was angry because that was in 2020, and I was angry. And when I heard, because when you're going through your dissertation, I interviewed so many people, and they said the same thing, that yeah, their students can't read. And I'm saying to myself, why is that okay?
Hmm.
If you were in corporate America and you only had 30% sales, you probably get fired. It'll be a big thing. So why is it acceptable in education that we have 70% of our students who can't read? And we know that by third grade, if they're not reading by third grade, up until third grade, we are learning to read. After that, you you read to learn, right? It's going to be hard for you to read to learn if you can't read. How are you going to access the content in science, in math, and social studies if you can't read? And so we see behaviors escalating by third grade. We see disengagement in school by third grade because our students know what they can do and what they can't do. And so if they are struggling to read, they can't show their friends. So what do?
Right.
They act out.
Hmm.
They act out so the teacher can send them to the principal's office right around the time that it's time for reading so that they don't have to show their friends that they can't read. And so if we get more of that, then we get disengagement. We get them sent to the principal's office. They get left back. They have, we call them names. We put labels on them. We disengage with them. We, we trample on their self-image, their self-concept, their very being. And we totally destroy them at third grade. And that bothered me. And so I wrote the book thinking that if I can get a message out to the community, to the village, that says we need three things. We need to look at children and what happens to children from 0 to 5. That matters. That's foundational. And then if we can look at what's happening in a classroom, if we can bring research to practice, because many of our teachers don't know the science of reading, so they can't teach what they don't know. So if we can look at what's happening from K to 3, and then if we look at what's happening, what do our children have access to, and what kind of opportunities do they have outside of the school? If we look at those three things and we correct them, that's a game changer. And so I needed to write the book that wasn't supposed to be a book that became a book. I needed to write it so that we have information in one place that will grow with families, that they can take to their church, to their doctor, to their school community and say, hey, how are we teaching reading? I just need to know, what can I do? What can you do? What can you do to build these readers? Because I think that they don't know. Not every we're not all educators. And so if you don't know, you think that what you're doing is okay,
Right.
but you're not building a foundation for reading to occur and you don't even know it.
How often is it due to like the parents not implementing it at home, and how often is it maybe that the student is suffering from dyslexia or a short attention span, or is it just like an unwillingness or a lack of interest in reading?
It could be all of the above, right?
Mhm.
So, but children with dyslexia can learn to read.
Right.
We have to pinpoint,
Right.
you know, which is why those 5 skills. There's Scarborough's reading rope, and it breaks down those skills. And so when you do assessment, you can pinpoint exactly where the child is strong and where they're weak,
Wow.
and then you build those skills that are weak. Right. What we tend to do is we rely on our teaching methods, and we start where we want to start instead of starting where children need to be. We don't meet children where they are. We just start where we feel comfortable, right? And so we have to build capacity, right, to understand where children are. And that comes with assessment, right? You cannot teach a child if you don't know where they are.
Right.
Mhm.
And so we don't know if it's dyslexia until we get into the weeds, right? Then we bring in our child study team, right? We don't know if it's a lack of interest until we get to know students. It goes back to somebody who said building relationships. You can't teach a child if you don't have a relationship with them. And children won't learn from adults if they don't like you.
Mhm.
And so you have to build relationships. Find out if it is something that I just don't have an interest in reading. And we as adults have to figure out because we know that they need reading. So how do we backdoor it?
Mm.
Put our heads together. Let's figure this out.
Right. Right.
We can't let them be.
Yeah.
Slip through the
Yeah.
cracks.
And and to your point, remember you were talking about why we create a test. And like Dr. Blanton is saying, it's an assessment of where you are. That's what tests should be really used for. Oh, you ignored 25%? Okay, cool. Let's go back and refresh. What is it that we missed? Where we didn't connect? And this is where I do think we make a critical mistake, Dr. Blanton.
And we don't give second chances.
Yes.
We don't
Very
give
good.
second chances. And I think you went, I don't want to gloss over the fact that you talked about grades, right? So when you think about it, you get a child, your student, and they come home and they have their grades, right? And they have, let's just say they have a C. And you're like, okay, they have a C. But what goes into that C? 5%, 10% of did you wear your uniform? Attendance. Okay, you came to school. That's another 5 or 10% of your grade. You participated. That's another 5 or 10% of your grade. You brought in your homework. That's another 5 or 10%. So is the C the C? Is the C, does the C denotes mastery in the skill? So if it's math or if it's ELA, can my child read? Because I don't know, because all this other stuff is before it. Is that C a C? Does it mean that my child is reading on a C level, or does it mean that my child is on a D level, that they're not reading, but it's a mask with all the other stuff that I just talked about?
Yeah.
And so we've got to change because our school system is set up. Um, it's not set up for second chances.
Yeah.
If you bomb out on a test, okay, you might have had a bad day or whatever. Let's put some criteria in place. You got to do all the homework. You got to do all of the pre stuff or whatever. Let's take it again. Let's see how you do.
Mhm.
Even the second chances though sometimes or like they make it at a harder level. I remember so someone got held back because of reading and from second to third grade. So we're going from second to third grade and you have all your friends around and then you're not able to go up to the next grade level with your friends just because of reading. And the second chance that was given to go over reading assessment was started off at Z and worked the way down rather than starting it from A and worked the way up. So already the second chance was built-in failure. It was already built-in like how if you're not like already a G level reader, how are you going to be expected to start off with your second chance reading a Z? You already brought down the child's hope, confidence, and all because it's and going down from Z, Y, X, etc. It's like it just gets diminished more and more, rather than if it started from A, B, C, confidence could have built up, next level would have been great. Sometimes, and I believe like it was really like the teacher's fault, right? Like the teacher, it was a new teacher too, but the teacher didn't set up for success.
Dr. Blandon said, and something that happens not only in schools but also in industries is like we don't meet people where they are. And when you have a higher education, you have a higher responsibility, understanding that they can't come to you, not because they don't want to. It's just like you have acquired years of experience and wisdom and knowledge that might seem unattainable to a lot of people, but that's why you have the responsibility, the higher you are, to go down to serve, to take the initiative to serve. That's what you're called to do. You're called to go to those levels and embrace them and say, what is it that you need from me? What can I do for you? It's not what you can do for me. Because at the end of the day, believe it or not, you learn so much when you mentor somebody. Because you go through a different personality. You're like, okay, I learned this. So when I see this kind of behavior or personality, I know how to roam around it, and I can create these great coping mechanisms with them. But when you don't expose yourself and you're always in your environment, what is it that you're really learning? And if you listen to what Dr. Blanton is saying, the importance of exposing yourself to environments. And what does a book do when you don't have the resources? Where does it take you? Someone else's brain, somebody else's imagination, a place in time, history, future, sci-fi, consciousness, education. And this is where, when you, like you're saying, like it's sad to hear that somebody couldn't acknowledge the fact. It's like asking themselves that question: am I being egocentric? Why am I thinking that I need to make it more difficult? He already failed. For that, that means that we need to restart from where, what things that he doesn't know, and create a program from that point. And also, don't forget about the things he knows, because we don't want him to forget what he knows.
Exactly.
So you have to target, like maybe you don't invest 100% here, but you invest 75 here on the 25 that he doesn't know, and then you invest 25 on the 75 that he knows. So you can keep the curriculum pushing forward 100%. But it is, again, I can't say, because I'm pretty sure teachers, they wear, just like managers in the industry, like 20,000 hats, and they can't create their own programs either. It's like the DOE gives them the program. Here it is. This is what I had a chemist David said, he graduated 20 years ago as a chemist, and he said they're still teaching with the same books he was graduating. They were already old. We're not even evaluating.
So that goes back to my question then. Is literacy for 90% of Americans, is that the goal? Because when a child's third grade and down, when they fail, who's failed? Who fails? They didn't fail by themselves. They didn't get themselves there. They don't get themselves up in the morning. They don't wash their clothes. They don't feed themselves. They don't go out and purchase the food. They don't go to teacher parent conferences and say, oh, well, I'm strong here, I'm weak in there. They don't make themselves do their homework. They don't sign the report cards. They don't do any of that. So if I was a second grade or third grade and I was held back, I'm going to go to my adults that are in my life, and I'm going to say, what did you do to prepare me for this moment?
Wow.
How did I get here? What did you do? How did you contribute to me being here? And I think it will be very different. And when we leave children back, we just leave them back. We don't look at the social emotional toil that it has. We don't look at where they are. We don't look at, okay, let's look at what did we do? It's always the child. They feel penalized. It's always the child. But we don't look at and reflect on what did we do. Did we have a teacher that was on maternity leave? Or did we have a teacher that was out? Did we have the teacher who was absent a lot? Do we have the teachers who have the capacity? Let's look at that. Let's then now look at what's happening at home. Let's bring everybody together where there's some issues that happen at home. There's so many things that we need to take into account before we hold a child back
Right.
because they didn't get themselves there.
Yeah, definitely. In your book, Dr. Blanton, what was the hardest thing that you had to write in there that you was like, this has to go because it has to be in
Um, there's a chapter about student agency. There's a part in there about I read a book and then it's called it's about um, the segregation of experiences,
there? Mm,
right? And that was the hardest part for me because it's so true and it's happening today. You go into an urban school district versus a suburban school district, and you see children in the urban setting, they've got to walk in a line. They have to wear uniforms. They have to keep their eyes straight ahead. They can't talk to anybody that they know or say hi to the teachers that they know in the hallway. They don't have um, they don't have an option as to what they want to learn. They don't have opportunity to talk to each other. They don't have opportunity. They don't have a choice and agency over what they're learning. It's all directed to them. And if they do have choice, they have to earn it. Whereas if you go to suburban, eh, they're wearing flip flops and pajamas and they're walking in the hallway and hey, Miss So and so, hey, so and so. And they have voice and choice over what they want, of what they're learning and how they learn it. You can go into a classroom and it's bubbling. Someone gets up, sharpen a pencil, someone goes to another group, and they're like, how did you do this? And if that happened in an urban district, they'll be suspended.
mm.
If there's a student in an urban classroom and they call out, or, because they know the answer, they call out, you're going to go to the principal's office because that's not the rule. But in suburbia, that's leadership skills. They're being assertive.
They're taking initiatives.
They're taking initiative.
Wow.
That's a great leader. But that same student in the same experience will go to the principal's office because they're being defiant, because they're not following the rules of the classroom.
Insubordination.
Insubordination. And so the experiences, that was the hardest chapter for me because the experiences that these students in these two different environments experience is very different. That was troubling to me
Mm.
because I see it. I know it to be true.
That's so hard too, because it's like
They're kids.
exactly right, and then like the adults like were trying to do their best,
Mhm.
right? Like no matter where they are, like I generally hope they're trying to do their best, and they're just trying to get them to be compliant to a rule, but it's like compliance is good to a certain extent.
Mhm.
Not when it's over exaggerated, where you
Mhm.
can't even be human
Mhm.
in a certain area. Like you can't even pass by your friends without even getting suspended, which sucks.
Mhm.
I went to Brandeis in the city. Every day we always had to go through like metal detectors and stuff, and we had four different schools on each floor.
Mm.
So you had you had you had like one of the kindergarten elementary schools on the first floor.
Mhm.
There was another high school on the second floor, uh, and on the third floor was our high school, and then another high school. So on the third floor, it was like split in half,
Mhm.
and the fourth floor was like GED. So we had a whole bunch
Mhm.
of kids and a whole bunch of different levels
Mhm.
in the school, um, and like during lunchtime, all the schools they kind of all get together in the cafeteria. So you'll have friends in different groups, um, or in different areas of the school, right? Like you want to say hello, but like as soon as you do say hello, you're gone. You try to make some groups with them, it's like no, like their principal tells their principal, your principal tells their principal,
Mhm.
then or either like the faculty start like talking, they're like, wait, and it's like, oh, I'm just trying to say hello to my friend. Um, but like those is kind of like it kind of sucks is that it is supposed to be compliant, right? Because then they're supposed to be I'm responsible within the school. If I go to another section, then I'm not in the actual setting of my school, or if anything happens, then like I had to mature to understand to understand that compliance. um, and it I guess like ways I connected was through sports, after school programs, things like that. Because then it's like when the day's over, that's when the chaos could be let loose. But there has to be like a balance between, I guess, chaos and and order. Um, it's just
You know what's
You can
funny?
have agency and still have order. Are we
Yeah.
building? My question is, are we building conform schools?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the
Or
hard part.
you
Yeah,
know,
Yes.
I mean, you can have you for safety reasons. You have to have boundaries.
Yeah.
You have to have rules. You
Yes.
have to have regulation. You have to have policies and procedures. Yes, but within that, you can give students a sense of agency, a sense of voice, a choice of how they want to learn, and and there's ways that we can balance that, but to say that students in an urban district have to earn those privileges, whereas the student in suburban, they're born with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, to me, the segregation of experiences in our public schools really gets to me.
Yeah. And also you gotta see like our behavior is very tribal too.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how we evolve and that's how we survive and that's how we conquer it is being tribal.
Mm-hmm.
So you're always gonna get that pushback, but there's an evolution to that. How? By you im- learning from that other environment. So you can now you don't become just a tribe, but now you become a real team. And this is where like I always talk about this. Like at work, everyone thinks they're a team, but they're really small tribal groups,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're not a team.
Mm-hmm.
A team means everyone is working in conjunction to the same objective, but we're tribal, right? Political parties is a tribe, right? You know, it. And one thing you were saying is also the segregations.
Mm-hmm.
How good have segregation worked
Mm-hmm.
for us in history?
Mm-hmm.
We know that is not good for us. And also, I do believe also that and we don't talk this much when we talk about education. It's like I do believe we have to teach our kids how to create healthy boundaries for yourself. Because then when you grow as an adult and then you have all these traumas, it's because you never learn how to create healthy boundaries. Now, healthy boundary doesn't mean uh, that you're going to create them egocentrically.
Right.
No, you're going to create them because they're good to build relationships with people, right? And they're a respect for yourself and for others, right? So that way you're able to understand like who can come in and who can come out, right? And you start purging who's good for you and who's not. But also, Dr. Blanton, I have two questions for you. I do believe that in schools we definitely need more physical education because how important is for the hypothalamus to produce all these good hormones. And, think about it at that age, at my age, I can't be sitting down all day. I got to go outside. I got to run. I got to go work out. And a child is only given like what, 30 minutes of recreation time, physical activity. I do believe that the curriculum has to give more of that physical education. But also, I wanted also your thought about what is charter school
Mm-hmm.
and with reading.
So the first question, yes, definitely, we need to make sure that students are moving. That is a part of development. That's a part of their development. And if we do not allow them to move, then again, we're hindering part of their growth. We're stunting part of their growth pattern. And so the whole notion with kindergarten, there because society says that we need the children can't read, so we need to give them more. Not understanding that if you take a break, let them go out and move their bodies, then come back, they're ready. The brain now is stimulated, it's ready. But when you don't give brain breaks, it's not going to they're not going to hold it in their mind. Just us.
Right.
After an hour in a meeting, we start doodling. 45 minutes, we start doodling, right? So just imagine children, they're gone. So all the stuff that you teach her, all the stuff that you're saying is in one ear and out the other. Because see, right now I see outside, I need to move. I need to be out there. I need to move. Um, so there was a big thing about taking blocks and dramatic play out of kindergarten. And in my district, we put it back in, right? It's good for multi-language learners, that it creates a safety net for them to be able to learn the language in a way that is non-threatening. And so as they're building with these blocks, they're talking to their friends, they're trying to communicate with their friends. That's the impetus of learning the language, right? They're playing, they're having a great time, they're problem solving, they're creating, they're imagining. And so to take those things away from a kid, knowing that it has value, it goes back to my question. Is literacy the goal for every American
Mm.
when we do things like that? And as far as charter schools are concerned, listen, wherever parents think that their child will thrive the best, that's up to them. But what I do know is that our charter schools really need to invest in professional development that's going to connect research and practice. And this is for public schools as well. You can't just go in thinking that I can teach because I know this subject, right? That does not a teacher make, right? You have to know um, the social constructs of human development. You've got to know your content, yes, but then you have to know how to deliver it in a way that the children are going to receive it. And that's a skill, that's an art. And so I don't have a problem with charter schools. The problem that I have is sometimes the capacity of the teachers are lacking.
Mm. I like what you're saying because also the agenda of charter schools is everyone has to go to college. That's the number one promotion of why charter schools, and it's a good, I believe it's a good thing, but I do think there's going to be a lot of kids that are going to be more crafty. They might want to go to a craft school.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with craft school. You were mentioning plumbers, electric, they're engineers. And I want people to understand
Mhm.
these individuals are engineers. Try to do a carpenter's job.
Mhm.
I dare you. I can't even cut one thing that I will mess up a whole. And that's the whole point. There's a lot of creativity. We don't promote trade schools that much. And in the curriculum of even in universities, the lack of active participation of the public, for example, you guys, are more freshly out of college, both graduated college.
Mhm.
How actively were you guys participating in school where you had a healthy debate about criteria of what a teacher was talking about? Because that's you want to embrace, you want to I would say develop further, I would say, ways of communicating. You have to learn how to debate.
Mhm.
And debating, it's not about even winning, it's about exposing the best idea.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I have to say though, I appreciated college more than like high school and grammar school because I was able to like structure my day around like what my passion was in education,
Mhm.
and then from there learn all of the other subjects. And I liked the like openness to the collegiate level of teaching than like my high school. And I noticed the difference, and I thrived in college more than I did in high school. Yeah, but go ahead. Sorry, Kevin.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. Yeah, I like college more than the other educations as well because it was about expressing an idea. There in the classes I took, there wasn't like a one answer is the answer. It was more about how can you express your idea about the subject and give it your turn around. So I went to school for a bachelor in fine arts and photography, and that was the fun. I loved it so much. One of the classes that I did have like a little debate in, I think I had like some debate with some of my professors sometimes. Um, but like what one of the classes I do remember is about my portfolio class. So and I was like really looking forward to that class. I didn't know how to really set a portfolio. Like really like how to take my work, put it into a book or into a place that really could be like, hey, this is all the best pieces. But instead of going through like a portfolio process, what we went through was like an editing process, like how to edit an image, and it was just like how to manipulate the photo, right? And I'm like, I don't really want to manipulate the photo. I'm not trying to do any like tricks in editing. I want to learn how to set a portfolio. Um, so I reached out to my professor and I told her like I'm so far before my college years I picked up the camera and I always had the camera since I was 14. So even throughout my whole high school I always had the camera. So I was already like proficient enough in all my basics. So my basics were already locked in. Just because I practiced for years on years on years. And it's self-taught education on the camera work, right? Um, so when I was going through that portfolio class, she was trying to teach us the basics of editing, not the basics of portfolio, like organizing.
Right.
So I told the teacher, like, I'm not trying to do any editing tricks. And she took that to a little offense. But I'm like, it's an editing trick, right? It's like it's not building my portfolio, and we'll shoot and we'll shoot and we'll shoot, and none of it was connecting to a building a portfolio. It was more like this is how you use the tone curve, just connect this with the exposure, and I told her that, and it was just I feel like I still never learned how to build a proper portfolio. And one of my other teachers, I think he agreed with it too, because I think they had like a conversation with each other. Because like the next class I went in with the next teacher, he started saying tricks, 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 like during each thing. So I think he kind of agreed with it, and the other teacher was just kind of like mad at me. But I saw the good grades, good everything. I saw
I can imagine how many people go through that experience of wanting to learn something, and then unfortunately the curriculum is different from the teacher. I want to ask you something, Dr. Blanton. When you were writing your book, what's something critical that you learned from writing it?
Good question. I learned that when you dig deep in research, you have to be ready for what you are going to uncover. Um, and and be able to take that information and reflect on it, because it may not be what you wanted to see, right? Some of the stuff that I uncovered, I didn't want to see,
Mm.
because I thought we were further than that. And so it took me back to a place to say, um, are we really where we think we are? And so I learned a lot about myself. I learned that I created some students who um, who were not successful in reading because of the program that I used, right? Of the strategies that I use, because I was not taught it in teacher prep programs. I don't know, right? And so when I was reading it, I had to say to myself, you're in this mix.
Wow.
You're a part of you are a part of the system. that failed children. That was hurtful. But I had to go through that process and say no more, no more. And so that was very difficult to really be reflective enough to say that you are part of an establishment that didn't do well by children, right?
Mm.
And then take that information and turn it around.
It must be so liberating too to be like, whoa, now I know, like this is I just didn't know beforehand, and that's okay. And now moving forward, it's like I know exactly my plan of attack. I know how to get these children up to a great reading level and how to practice and preach basically about it as well. Like we should be advocating for this. Like that's like the perfect way with research, you know. Like truths are some truths are sometimes hard to encounter, but when it's encountered, there is a liberation behind it because it opens a new pathway of dimension and makes something not it makes the thinking process about it expanded.
I like the fact that when you were saying this, Dr. Blanton, there was a lot of emotion. Even I felt the emotion. I don't know if you guys felt the the fact that you dig in so deep that you found yourself in it, but then you were able to pull yourself out to embrace something new. And when we expose something new to the world that works, like in your case, I'm pretty sure you'll face with challenges, you know, because people have a hard time seeing a new mechanism that do work. How did you handle and manage through those moments where you were like, well, you were part of this, but now you're advocating for the truth now?
So so that's part of the frustration is it's like I've got this new thing, guys, and it's not a new thing, but I've got some information that I want to share to help you in your practice, right? And you get doors closed, but I don't take offense to it because it's a sensitive issue. When we talk about reading, especially in the African American community, it creates agita. It creates stress because of the history. So I thought, as an African American woman, who's better to bring forth this message, right? To say, look, we need to connect research to practice. And I'm talking straight to colleges and universities. We need to look at the course offerings in the teacher prep programs. We're not building teachers' capacity as far as reading is concerned. We've got to do that. And so when doors are closed, my husband is my agent, sort of say,
Yeah.
he helps me. And he's calling people and he's like, listen, we can come in, we can do this, we can do that. And sometimes we don't hear from them, right? But it's okay. I think he gets a little, upset. But with me, I'm like, this is a race, right? Not for the quick athlete, but it's endurance. And it took us years, decades to get here. My book has only been out since August. It's not going to take months for us to get out of it. And so people have to come to the point where I came to and say, okay, I reflected. Now I see, and now I'm going to do better. When you know better, you do better, right? When you know better, you do better. And so I'm waiting for them to change their heart, and then we go in. Um, and it's going to take I'm not here for the quickness, right? For a quick turnaround. I'm here for the process, for the duration. And so where one door closes, another will open, right? And then hopefully we get enough doors open that others will see the good work that's happening and then want to go back and look and say, I can make a difference in the lives of children, and this is what I need to do. And I say to them, when you fall down and your child hurt their knee, break their thumb, what do? You go to the doctor, you go to an orthopedic specialist. You do whatever you need to do to fix your baby, to get your baby well, right? Your child well. The science is what we need to take our students from where they are to where they need to be. It's about the science, it's about understanding the science of reading and how it applies to our children and what each can do, the community, the school system, and parents. Those three entities coming together and doing what they need to do to put children on a better road to reading. I think that is going to be it. That's what we need. Understanding that reading is not just about letter names and letter sounds. It's bigger than that.
Dr. Grant, we're gonna do a last round of questions. But go ahead. No, go ahead, Autumn.
No, I was going to ask, so after completing the book, and let's look through the lens of hope, what are you hopeful for in 5 years, like where education should be, or where do you hope it will be?
In 5 years, I hope to write a sequel to the book to say that 70, 80, 90% of our students are reading above grade level, and this is how it was done. These are the steps that you need to do to take in order for your child to be on a reading trajectory. That's what I hope to do in 5 years. Where I hope to be in 5 years.
So we're gonna do a last round of questions, and then we normally what we do we reflect about what we learned in the podcast today. If you wish to participate, please be so because we would love to know what you thought of this environment. I will start the question, then I'll let battle. I let Kevin and Autumn battle the last two, but in literacy, you see there's proficiency of words when you read a book, but then when you hear our music, you see the reflection of those that really don't know how to read so well. And there's a lot of slangs, a lot of curses, a lot of misinterpretation, or just to rhyme with no sense.
Mhm.
It, you can see how the impact of education on one or another
Mhm.
and the choices each person makes because also in our adulthood
Mhm.
we can make a choice to educate ourselves too and there's a responsibility with that.
Mhm.
Where do you see, for example, music is so influential
Mhm. Mhm.
because it stimulates in many ways the brain, but why do you see, where do you see that people are so influenced by music that are degrading versus a good book that is educating?
Mhm. So I'm going to say that music is a universal tool and that we can learn from music. And I think that everybody has their representation of what music should be, right? So I don't want to put any dampers on that, right? So whether it's rap, hip hop, whatever, right? What we can learn is take the lyrics. If you have students, and I say this all the time, let's learn to read through music, right? You can do that. What do you think this artist is trying to say? How can you, how would you interpret what this person is saying, right? Um, what would you say differently? Or if you had the chance to talk to this artist, what would you say? How did it make you feel? Good, bad, or indifferent? What would you want to say? What do you think is going on in the head of this artist? What would you ask them? Turn it around and let them be a reporter, a journalist, someone to go out and uncover a story, right? So again, if we're trying to get students to read and we're trying to get them to understand the power that they have, just flip it, right? Just flip it. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that's in music that one side or the other might agree with or not agree with. But again, that's a form of expression. And I think they have a right to express themselves, right? The way they want to express themselves. And I have a right to listen or not to listen. But when it comes to our students, they're going to listen. They're going to listen. So what we do is we teach them how to listen. We teach them to ask questions. We teach them to wonder. We
Mhm.
teach children to try to get into the head of the person who is creating. What would you do differently? How do you want to create? You know, do you want to build? Do you want to tear down? What does that look like for you? So music has different genres as far as music is concerned. And I think that it could be used as a powerful conversational tool, to discuss current events, to discuss what's going on in the world that this artist had to create this,
Mhm.
right? What do you think? What's happening? Let's look at the time frame. If this happened in the 80s and this happened in the 90s, let's look at historically what was happening during that time and how the person chose to express himself or herself. What do you see the connection is today?
Mhm.
So I would frame it like that,
Yeah.
as opposed to saying to a child, don't listen to that. Because when you say don't, they're going to. But give them the tools that they need to be able to dissect and ask questions and wonder.
Mm. I love your answer because, like, for example, NWA,
Mhm,
which is they're considered classic now.
mhm,
They were going through a lot of social issues back
mhm,
in LA.
mhm,
And if you really listen to the content, although there's some vulgarity,
mhm, mhm,
again, they're telling their story.
mhm,
And if you really listen to the lens of how they feel, because they sing what they feel
mhm,
and what they are looking every day at how they're being targeted by the police, et cetera, et cetera, and what they have to do to survive in a very dangerous environment. It's true what you're saying. You can become an investigator, embrace like, okay, what was going on? Okay, cool. The gangs were having this war. It's almost like reading, I don't know, something medieval, right? Medieval times, they were cutting each other's throat
mhm,
because of kingdoms, and et cetera, et cetera. I love the way you put this together because I'm not going to lie. I listen to rap and hip
mhm,
hop.
mhm,
All right. Now it's my job to, see how that is going to contribute or not going to contribute to what I want to learn or not. So I love how you really put that together
mhm,
because there's a stigma that if don't listen because you will get so influenced about it. But at the end of the day, we all know what good and bad is.
mhm. You teach it.
It teach it exactly. Teach it. This was this reaction because of this, but this is ask the questions like you said. Be curious. Is it morally correct? No, but this is how they interacted in that event. I don't know who wants to take the next question.
So you were mentioning that only in like readers they develop something in their brain called the letterbox, right?
Mhm.
I was wondering if you could elaborate more on it.
So there's areas of the brain. So you start out with, just learning letters and letter sounds, and then you go into those sounds to make words. And then you go from the words to the meaning of the words, right? And so when you're reading, you don't want to have to stop every second to decode a word, to figure it out, to pronounce the word, right? So the brain rewires itself and it's called a letterbox. And so that's automaticity. That's where you want to, the words that once you read them, that you automatically know them for the next time you read. So that now you don't have to stop and decode, you just read the word. So we want those words in the letterbox, that mapping so that they understand what the word is when they read it the next time. And so now, why is that important? It's important for fluency, right? Most of our kids have trouble with fluency because they're stopping to decode every single word and they're using more of their brain space, to decode instead of using brain space to comprehend. And so, what we want is more words in the letterbox. What's important about the letterbox is it's not found in non readers.
Mhm.
Through imaging, you only see it in readers. So, what does that mean? It means that reading literally changes the brain.
Powerful. I love how you're also in a infinite game of reading advocacy, because it's not a finite game where it's like, okay, I'm gonna get here and check it off, perfect, I'm done. It's more like it's an infinite game of getting people to read more,
Mhm.
to literally transform their brains,
Mm-hmm.
which is so important.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to have one sentence
Mm-hmm.
to show the power of reading,
Mm-hmm.
what would it be?
Every child that enters kindergarten enters with a resume, and that resume will dictate whether reading is going to be a challenge or not.
Hmm. That's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, hold on, let's get out of here, guys. Let's walk on. Dr. Blanton, like, did it again. I have one last question, and this is just out of curiosity because everything evolves.
Mhm.
We evolved from being the caves painting. That's one of the forms of communication that we wanted to imprint. Um, and obviously, reading is going to. Well, I don't know with certainty because we don't know the future, but I'm pretty sure it will evolve.
Mhm.
What will you think reading will evolve in the future for us?
Um, I think we're going to, although I love book the paper part, love to go through. My middle son, he likes to smell the pages. He's still, I love underlining and writing in the columns, but I think that's going to be history. I think technology, our books are going to be in a form of technology. The ebooks, I think that is the future as far as reading is concerned. And I think, unfortunately, I think we're going to get to the point where students are going to continue to enter college without having read a whole book.
Mhm.
So that is problematic because of technology, because of texting. It's quick. Everything is quick, so they don't have time to sit through and read a book from front to back. They want the cliff notes. That's it. They just want, give me step one, give me step two, get bulleted for me. I don't even want narrative. Just give me a bullet. Um, but I think that's where we're going. I think that we can get to a point where 90% of our citizens are readers. I don't think that that's too far of a goal. But if the government, if our legislators, if our systems don't come together to make sure that that happen and outline a pathway forward for that, it's not going to happen.
Mhm.
And when I say the systems, I mean the health system, I mean labor, I mean criminal justice. All of those systems contribute to the development of a child. And if all of those systems don't come together and say the goal is 90% reading proficiency, and then this is what we have to do, if that doesn't happen, then that 90% is not going to it's not going to be it's not going to be reached, right? So I think futuristically gone are the paper parts of the book. And I think that it will be digitized. And it has that has good and bad in it. Because again, we want the interaction with the books. We want to talk about the front of the book, the back of the book, the spine of the book, the way it feels. What do you think the book is about just by looking at the color? You want to talk about the capital letters, the end, the punctuation mark. What do you think? Why is it in exclamation point or question mark? What do you think the author meant by that? You want to have those types of discussions, and it reading it electronically, it's very different than reading the paper book.
Mhm.
Hmm. You know what's so funny? I used to use Spark Notes and Cliff Notes all the time. I wish I was so. I wish I didn't do that back then. I wish I respected my reading self and my development of reading. But I read those paragraphs.
He was like, I'm good.
So read your books, guys. Spark notes and clip notes, they're good, but they're not as good as reading.
Dr. Blanton has a good point because like there's like the storytelling. Imagine if like you don't go through the drama of the storytelling that develops the story. It's like yeah, she dies. Like
Yeah.
it's like and you're like, what the hell? What's the point?
Build up.
Story development.
Quick homework done. No.
Yeah.
No, but I really do wish I respected my reading when I was younger. So if you guys are young out there, and you're reading, just like literally like read your book, have fun with it, and use Spark Notes as a assist,
Yes.
not as the homework tool, like I did. But still, you guys did great out there. Keep reading.
All right, guys. What was your major takeaway? So who wants to get that one first? Go ahead, please, Autumn. Love it.
Oh,
You beat me to it.
um, oh wow, I have so many. But one of my one of my favorite books. My favorite book is the Bible. In fact, I'm on a journey now, reading it from cover to cover. So that's my favorite. It keeps me grounded. It helps me to evolve into the person that God wants me to be. But there was a book called Wired to Read. It's old, but it to me it was the book that sparked my interest in brain development and reading. I still have the book. I still have all of my underlines, but that was one of my favorite books that professionally put me on another avenue as far as my profession is concerned. So, why did
Thank you for sharing. Um, and so for my takeaway, I guess I've learned that it's so important to connect with our children and to teach them the basics. Like nothing is easily discarded. To just be like, oh my god, I'm just gonna sit down with my child on an iPad and I can just work in the background. Like every minute matters and their development matters. And everything that you spoke to today, so beautifully, by the way. Thank you. It really enlightened me. Like we need to invest in our children's futures and in their hearts and their minds because they're going to be our next generation. We're going to raise up new educators, new leaders, new presidents. We need to give them the dignity that they deserve and giving them a good education. Also, if they don't understand something, to get on their level with them and make yourself one with them and not to just. I love that you mentioned the segregation of experiences because even like Heaven's point about being left back, that segregates you from your peers. Even wanting to educate yourself after that, feeling like you're discarded from your peers or in society, it makes you not even want to bother anymore with learning because there's a humiliation. You've suffered humiliation from your teachers, and it makes you feel like, well, why should I bother anymore? So I love that you highlighted that for me. In any of the youth that I encounter, I want to like really highlight the beauty of learning at your own pace and finding what sparks your passion in education and give them a book. Thank you.
Oh yeah, reading's awesome. I don't know, like I'm not too fond of a reader, but I learned that I must in order to keep my brain healthy, in order to continue. Because reading is like an individual process. Only you can sit in front of a book, right? Only I can sit in front of a book, and only you guys can sit in front of a book. So I needed to develop my brain in order to keep the engine running, the oil to keep going. Reading is a must because it's an expansion of knowledge and it's also expansion of experience. And you get to learn about certain time. You get to learn about how someone did something. It's more of, to me at least, it's reading is like a inspirational tool to find the aim if lost in the
Love it.
I like that.
Love it. I love what you just said.
dark.
You know, my major takeaway was how how creative we can be to use anything to turn it into reading.
Mhm.
You know, and there's no limitation. The only limitation is ourselves
Mhm.
when we can't see outside of the box and think outside of the box. I love how you interpret, like how you can make someone research about music into reading,
Mhm.
right? And you don't think about those things because, you know, there's, and reading also develops that investigation part that you really need when you go into education because you have to expand your perspectives. And how do you expand it? Not only living and seeing and watching, but also interpreting what people are writing.
Mhm.
You know, and when you read those things, like you said, you're able to like ask questions about it. You know, I love that. Like, what do you mean by saying X, Y, and Z? Were you hurt or were you being hypothetically saying these things? And that interpretation also makes you, it expands your intelligence too, you know. And one thing nobody can take away is your reading skills. It's something you will have for the rest of your life. So it doesn't serve the person that is mentoring, it serves you and you only when you learn how to read. You know, and I like that. It's such a good investment that a lot of people are, you know, not doing such a great job in investing in themselves in this aspect, you know. And I hope that everyone that's listening today, they're able to see the science behind it. And Dr. Blanton was here explaining to us how there are no limits. Everything can turn into reading. Even an adventure can turn into reading. You know, that was my major takeaway. I don't know, Dr. Blanton, if you have a takeaway from us.
Yeah, I appreciate the fact that you guys were so open. And I appreciate your questions because it had me thinking. And it had me go back in time and just be reflective of the purpose of the book. And I learned that we still have work to do, but even though you've not read a lot, you were still doing wonderful things. But to just hear and to be able to take what I've written and to be able to digest it, hear it, and then give it back to me, and in a way that I thought it would go out. So you're giving it back, and this is exactly what I wanted people to take away from the book.
Mm.
Some of those same things that you talked about is what I really want to make sure that I put out there in the public. So that worked. That really made me feel good.
And information of the book is going to be on our page. One of the things the Ethics Guild podcast is going to do, every single episode of the Ethics Guild podcast that we put, including the walk, we're going to promote your book.
Thank you.
It's going to be on Instagram, every single one of our social media, because we do believe in your research. We do believe in your work, and we definitely need to expand people to see this book and get the opportunity to reach out to it. So everything will be on the on our website. It's going to be on all of our social media. So please, guys, you have any questions, you have any comments that you have for Dr. Blanton, I will definitely make her aware of those questions, and we will be answering them. But we really appreciate and value your time, and I know you're a very busy person, John. You guys don't see John, but John is here. He's a great individual, great leader, great community leader as well. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. And now that we are in Cameron, we do something called a walk, in which we talk about stories in the Bible,
Mhm.
and we try to dissect the leadership styles, the stories, what's the purpose behind. I know you're a busy person, but we would love to have you as a guest at the walk for when we talk about, like, for example, this week. What are we talking about?
The transfiguration.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So when you have time, we would love to invite you to talk outside of the realms of science, more into the Bible, and we hope that we'll let you choose
Okay.
what would you
Okay.
what we like to talk about. But when you have the time, I'll talk to Johnny.
Yeah, no, that will be fine. Right now, I'm pushing through Chronicles,
Oh,
Samuel,
Sam.
Psalms.
We did Psalms. We did the Samuel is that's probably one of my favorite books. There's a lot
There's
of
a lot.
there's a lot of
I'm
things
taking
happening.
so many notes. I'm like, oh my goodness, but yeah, that's so yeah. I'm diligent. Normally I get stuck at Chronicles because it's hard. Chronicles is hard. So moving into Kings and so we'll see. So
Yeah.
it's exciting though. I'm like, oh, what?
Yeah, so we do the walk, and trust me, we learn more than
Mhm.
anything else when we do this. We do our homework, but
Mhm.
as we're talking, and everyone's giving their perspective. It's like I don't know. To me, it's like I'm like, oh my God, I didn't think it this way.
Mhm.
And Autumn says something, and then Kevin says, I'm like,
Mhm.
but it's a great, great experience.
Oh
But
yeah.
but thank you so much for your time, Dr. Blanton.
Nope.
And thank you for being here. Guys, don't forget to subscribe, comment, hit that like. If you have any questions, ask them, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think that it was so much of a change. We've always had a reading problem. There's always been a reading problem, right? COVID did not unveil this great big reading problem. COVID unveiled the access and accessibility, right? That woke us up. But we've always had a problem in this country with reading, going back to anti-literacy laws. So I just want to preface what I'm about to say with the fact that our brains were not wired to read. We have to teach it to read, right? It does this great thing, right? It rewires itself, right, to form pathways for reading to develop. A lot of people don't understand that. It's very different than language. Language, you can put a child in a room full of people who are speaking and they will speak. You don't have to teach them how to talk, right? That is not going to happen for reading. You cannot sit someone in a room full of people who are reading, whether they're reading out loud or silently. It's not going to happen. You have to teach it to read, right? That starts very early. What we think is reading starts in kindergarten, and then we build these habits in kindergarten. And if we think that, we're 5 years already behind, right? Reading starts really at the moment of conception. How? Well, all of the stuff that mom eats, all of the environmental pressures and stress impacts the developing brain. Reading is all about the brain. The brain is the main character, right? And so if we understand that, then we have a point of reference. And so how do we build stamina, right? Because in order to learn to read and read well, you have to build stamina. I'm like, this is a race, right? Not for the quick athlete, but it's endurance. And it took us years, decades to get here. My book has only been out since August. It's not going to take months for us to get out. And so people have to come to the point where I came to and say, okay, I reflected, now I see, and now I'm going to do better. When you know better, you do better.
New York City.
There's so much more beyond the walls. Let's explore.
I'm a beast. You know I'm a beast. Welcome to the feast. My whole team off the leash. We don't know defeat. Everybody eat. Hey, you know I'm a beast. You know I'm a beast. Welcome to the feast. My whole team off the leash. We don't know defeat. Everybody eat. Hey, you know I'm a beast.
Can I run up the score, run up the board, breaking them all? Ay, ay, walking the door, you know what happened? We step on the floor. Ay, ay, coming for more. You don't want problem. honest, you already know it.
Maestro style, cosmic call. Transform your mind. It is time to create.
Don't